But tonight, I like to think of this as an informal chat between, I was going to say between two friends, but between myself and a Star Wars stormtrooper for tonight. Otherwise, going by the name of Cris Rogers. You wanted to know what Cris got up to on his days off, and you've just seen for yourself exactly what it is. Cris, tell us a little bit more about your work as a stormtrooper.
Is that the intro you asked for?
Yeah, well, I just added to that one. I thought, but there's some good stuff with it, though, isn't there?
My about 5-6 years ago, my wife said, "Cris, you need a hobby." She said, "All you do is work and church. You need a hobby." And she said, "What do you fancy doing? Whatever you want to do, if it keeps you fit and well in ministry, what is it?" And I said, "I want to join the 501st Legion of Stormtroopers." And I thought she'd say, "Choose fishing."
I was going to say most people take up golf or something, don't they?
And she actually bought me a kit to build my own Stormtrooper armor. And I joined the garrison. There's about 2,500 of us in the UK, probably about 40 or 50,000 across the world. And we, on our days off, go into Great Ormond Street Hospital and other charity events as Stormtroopers. So there you go.
Fabulous. So, apart from being a Stormtrooper on your days off, tell us a little bit more about you, your ministry, where you are, what led you to this point, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so 2010, Becky and I, my wife Becky's ordained. We'd both been in Harrow for 5 years and really got this sense that we wanted to go somewhere where a young evangelical didn't particularly want to go. What I mean by that is very often the evangelical churches do tend to be placed in the more wealthier areas, particularly in London. And we just said to the Bishop of London, look, send Becky and I somewhere that you can't get a young clergy person with a family to go to. And actually the last 10 years, it's radically changed in East London. We were one of the first, but now we're not at all. So we moved to East London in 2010 to a church of 7, 65% Bengali as a neighborhood, so a very Muslim mission field. And the house was being rented out to a group of lads that were using it to record softcore porn from. So the house was being rented out separate to the church. And the church was set for closure. And we said to Bishop, don't close All Hallows. We'd love to see what we could do. So we arrived here in 2010. And we live in community. There's 10 of us that live in the household. And this summer will be our 10th year here in East London. And we love it. We absolutely love it. I'm from West Yorkshire, and East London feels somewhat like Tower Hamlets is the hamlets of the Tower of London, the villages of the Tower of London. So it feels like these little villages. So it feels very northern in that kind of sense. Very people love community in East London.
And we'll come on to this a little bit more later on as we go through. And I should have said that if anybody's got any questions they want to ask Cris, then please just fire those in as we go along, and then we don't have any kind of wasted time at the end. Please just ask away. We, as well as doing this work, you're also involved in an organisation called We Are Making Disciples. Do you just want to say a little bit about that, and then we'll talk, more about your work as we go on?
Yeah, 5 years in at All Hallows, we realised that we had a very big front door and we had an even larger back door. So we as a church were growing. We were looking at planting a church down the road from us, and we realised that there was a lot of people coming to faith. They were around for about a 2-year period and then we're drifting away. And a friend of mine was a management consultant. I said, look, would you help me think through what the problem is here? People come into faith, they get baptized, 2 years on, they leave. What's wrong? And what we realized was people loved our church. They loved our community. They loved the way we talked about Jesus. We think they loved Becky and I. Nobody ever said they didn't. And we started going around and having cups of tea with them, saying, why did you just drift off? What happened? And I think what we realized was we'd failed to disciple them. Okay. We'd failed to take them on the next step journey of what it means to follow Jesus. And it's like they'd fallen in love for a first time. If you look at how the pattern of love works for most people, you have a 2-year period where it's wonderful. Then after 2 years, the love feeling disappears, and now you have to base that relationship on more than feeling. And what we were realizing was people got to 2 years, the feeling had gone, the excitement had gone, and we'd not given them enough of a foundation for them to live out faith well. So we didn't lead them in that discipleship journey. So about 5 years in, we started thinking about discipleship, and we started making stuff that other people started saying, we like this, can we use that at our church? And in the end we said, well, why don't we start something separate that we can help put out discipleship content and material through, that's separate to All Hallows, just so that it's very clean and clear, because we're not a very big church. We're a highly missional church. Our focus is very, very, very local. And what we didn't want to do is trying to do the mission, and then over here we were trying to help people with discipleship. So by creating something else called Making Disciples, we were able to create a space to share the stuff that we felt God was really helping us produce and create. And it also meant that we were able to get support and backing from people like Essential Christian, now SBCK, to put some of these resources out so they were as cheap as we could possibly produce them for.
So we talked a bit about Making Disciples and about your passion for being there in the community where you are in East London. And I think I first came across some of your work reading a book you wrote called Practice and Resurrection. And I was really drawn in by the kind of the nature of the story, so that it was really rooted in a real experience in that community. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you, as leaders and as a church, embedded yourself and rooted yourself in the community that you're now in, and how some of those stories became, were real life for you, that was played out.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to our underlying theology. Are we here to be church? Are we here to do church? What is it? And I think when I look at the Gospels, you clearly see the incarnation is the DNA of the life of Christ. Moves into the neighborhood, becomes the boy next door. And for us, that idea of incarnation was really what we theologically believed, which means we wanted to be local, which means longevity is really important. You can't move somewhere for a short space of time and then hop off. You really need to be somewhere for a significant chunk of time, so you become one of the locals. And I didn't want to be known as the new vicar. I wanted to get to the point where people just knew me as Cris. They felt we'd been around long enough, they trusted us, and we were one of the locals. And I think I was telling you earlier today when we spoke, we had an incident last week, a major incident. And off the back of this major incident, a little group of us took a coffee cart out into the street, and we were serving out tea and coffee at this major incident. And there was lots of people posting online going, it's amazing to see the East Londoners doing what East Londoners do best, serve the community. And that sense we were having now is, no, we really are local now. We're no longer the ones that have moved in. We're no longer those that have come to do mission. We're just living here, and we're living for Jesus, and hopefully doing it in a beautiful way.
I mean, I liked earlier when we spoke, you said that here were people from East London just doing a typical East London thing, and you reflected on the fact that one was from Brazil. Did you say yourself from West Yorkshire, somebody else from a different part of the country? Yeah. And that's just a great kind of illustration, I think, of how you've become part of that community.
So the key things for us has always been our kids will go to the local schools. We really felt it was important that our kids went to the local junior school. And we decided that we would walk, cycle, tube, bus. I hate buses, so I took this. But we wanted to travel around on foot in a way that you bump into people. We didn't want to have a car that we could drive around and almost not engage with the neighborhood. We just wanted to live in it and travel in it and see people in it and get to know people in it. And now it's the point where whenever we walk around the estate, you're bumping into 5-6 people. It's such a local village feel.
Can you give us an example, perhaps, of how that kind of relationship that you've built up, apart from, serving a terrible tragedy that you had just a couple of weeks ago? Can you give us an example of how that kind of bumping into people has actually helped you in sharing faith as you've gone around?
many folk at our church are at All Hallows because we bumped into them. We chat with them. I walk around with my head up. And I now walk around with my head up with Raf, who's my assistant pastor, and I used to do it with Dan, who was my pastor before him. We would just, Tuesday afternoons, go for a walk around the neighbourhood, and we just walk with our head up, looking for eye contact. And if anybody has eye contact, we just want to chat. We're not aiming to get to Jesus. We just want to chat to them because we want to get to know our neighbourhood. We want to know people as well as we can by name, so that they know us and we know them, and that even when you bump into each other on the tube or on the bus, you can have a conversation and people know you're as friendly. So that's our first kind of plan of action, is just to walk around. And then the next bit we've noticed is it's really easy sometimes to get to know somebody in the street and then be able to say to them, they'll tell us about something that's just happened and we'll say, I'll pray for you about that. And you just start that kind of relationship. And I think prayer is one of our greatest evangelistic tools that we've forgotten about, being offering to pray. And then as we've got to know people a bit more, we've been able to say, we were praying for you. How did that go? And then we've been able to say, well, can we pray now for you where we are? So we actually do stop and pray for folk in the street. And I would say this is the most boring, normal ministry a parish priest has done for hundreds of years. But it's brilliant. And there's so much beautiful, sexy ways of doing church. The basic ways of doing church are brilliant. And that's what we've found. We don't have to be something incredibly snazzy. You just be people who love Jesus in your neighborhood, and it becomes contagious. People want to be with you. And that's how our church has grown. So in our church, there's very few cars. Most people walk. Most people cycle to church. It really is local, which has affected how we have responded during COVID, as an example.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to that in just a moment. It's saying how things have changed. I know when we've spoken in the past, a lot of your ministry has been centered around hospitality, I guess, hasn't it? And sharing coffee, and you've just built this fantastic new cafe now, which almost had to close, I guess, as soon as it opened. But you told me a wonderful story about handing coffee out outside the tube station on one occasion, and your encounter with a nurse. Would you just like to share that?
Yeah.
I just think it's just a great story.
What we did was we were brewing tea and coffee at 6 a.m. in the morning. We'd go to our local DLR station, it's like a tube station, and we'd just hand out coffee for no agenda other than to love people. And there was a nurse that came along one day, and I got chatting with her, and she said she wasn't looking forward to a day. So I said, look, can I pray that you see something of God at work in your day today? So I just prayed for her outside the station. She went off. A little while later, we're in the street again, 6:30 in the morning. She comes along, we give her a coffee, and I say, I prayed for you, how was it? And she said, she got to work, she sat down at a desk, and the first patient that came in, his name was Jesus. And he was a Spanish guy called Jesus, and he came in, and she just really sensed the humor of God in that situation. So every time I see her now, I ask her if she's seen Jesus again, and invite her to come. She keeps saying, I'm going to come to your church one day. I'm going to come to your church. But we've had lots of those really funny moment conversations at the DLR station that has become a deeper conversation that we can pick up further down the line, where God has humored us with something. It's been really fun doing that stuff. So
you've had, you've had all these encounters as you've been walking around, and you've been bumping into people, and then suddenly comes along a pandemic. It says the worst thing you can do is bump into people whilst walking around. How has that changed your ministry, and what advice and experience have you got to share with people that are watching and listening to this?
Our experience is unique. I don't expect it to fit everybody at all. But actually, I think what we have found is it has really hammered home a point that we've been making for years. We have some folk who absolutely adore worship, singing worship. I am slightly concerned that they idolize sung worship. Mm-hmm. And what we have at All Hallows, 7 years ago, we'd been prayer walking around our neighborhood, and there was an elderly day center. And we prayed that we might be able to get more involved with it. And I got this phone call out of the blue. Chris, do you realize that the vicar always has a trustee's place on this at this elderly day centre. Do you want to join? And I said, I'd love to. We were praying that I'd get more involved. And then 12 months later, I went on holiday. Just before we went on holiday, my wife really sensed the Lord say to her, September is going to be a game changer for you guys. We came back off holiday and there was a letter on my desk. It was from all of the staff at the day centre resigning. They said, we've had enough. Everybody's dying in the neighbourhood. It's a very young neighbourhood. There's not many elderly around. Because it's Bengali, the elderly that there are tend to be at home, being cared for at home. We've resigned. And unknown to me, the other trustees had met and decided they wanted to gift the centre to the church, because it was originally started by a member of the church. So we ended up getting our hands on Fern Street Settlement. And at this, we teach Bengali women English. We have packed out ESOL classes. We run our youth work, kids work from there. We do like time for tea for the elderly in there. We engage with the local junior school using that centre, do a lot around parenting. So COVID hits, we've got a coffee shop and we've got a community centre. And it was almost like God had prepared us for turning, just slightly tweaking those things. And suddenly the church was not worshipping any longer with singing. It was worshipping by serving 110 school children a week breakfast. Creating craft packs for all these families at home, having to juggle kids, no gardens, all in flats. So we were able to make, every week we made a craft pack for the kids. So there was a craft activity in the game and something else for them to do. And that went out every week to about 130 children across the neighbourhood. And they were the kids that we knew we were particularly concerned about. We do a lot with mums around domestic violence. So we were able to really harness those relationships and check up on women that we knew. And that was really exciting. So we've been able to mobilise the centre to really act fast and become a solution, food bank and all that kind of stuff. The coffee shop, we turned it into a zero contact shopping experience where you could get your bread, your milk, your eggs, your flour, all the basics. You'd order it online and then you'd pick it up from the door.
Right, okay, great.
We have had a wonderful time in terms of responding to the neighbourhood and being ready to just respond. I think what was really good for us was our church at no point said, are we going to respond? The church always was saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? There was just this desire and readiness. So we set up a helpline like many churches. People could ring up to get their prescriptions and all of that kind of stuff, shopping picked up. And we got all of our younger professionals who were furloughed and they suddenly were delivering food and loo rolls. And so we became the go-to people in a time of need. And I think for us, it was the greatest discipleship opportunity we had. We'd done the training, we'd done equipping, we'd been challenging people to get involved, and now suddenly it was game on. Are you going to get involved? We are I can't express how we are in a really poor neighbourhood. On the deprivation indices, we've been at number 3%, and it's kind of creeping up to about 5 now. But we did a little offering and we raised £5,000 to a fund called Friends of All Hallows Fund. And that fund was created to resolve any small financial issue that we saw in the neighbourhood. This is a poor church giving generously to then be generous to others. And it's just been awesome to see what we've been able to support and help families whose cookers died during COVID, and we've been able to order a cooker, have it delivered and fitted, and all of that stuff has just, for me, been a wonderful example of this is really church. This is really it. We've just been in training. The singing has been training us for this moment.
So you were saying that last night your leadership team met and you were discussing about whether or not you should meet back in the building again. And I guess you had one of those eureka moments, didn't you, that we quite often don't get, but wish for in ministry or in our church life as groups of elders, members. Just tell us a little bit about your conversation last night.
I explain this. So on Saturday, I'm talking to somebody who comes to my church. And that conversation went like this: Chris, if you don't open the church this coming Sunday, you're colluding with Satan. So that's one response that we've had.
Yeah.
If If you don't open the church, you're colluding with Satan. I've also had people who've said, we're washed in the blood of Jesus, Chris. We can't catch it. Yet we've had members of our church in hospital on ventilators. No, last night, one of our newest Christians, she's a year and a half new Christian. She's on our elders. I got her on our elders. I want as many new believers as possible on our elders because they just bring something fresh. And Cheryl last night said, we were discussing if we should open or not. And Cheryl said, but Chris, you've been teaching us all along that we can worship anywhere. And she said, I don't need a church building. She said, I can pray in my kitchen. I can pray in my garden. I can pray when I go to the shops. We don't need to open church, Chris, because we can be church wherever we go. And I was like, yes, come on, Cheryl, you've got it. Here's an East London woman. She's grasped it more than some of these long-term Christians who are, seriously believing that we're colluding with Satan. Here's Cheryl going, we don't need a bill. You don't need to do that. We are church.
So our last webinar, we were talking with a friend of yours, with Bex Lewis, who was talking about all kinds of stuff digital, and talking about that very point that actually, people are being fed from so many different sources at the moment, and some of it is really life-giving and enriching, and some of it is quite worrying about the teaching they're receiving that makes us think that we're all safe from COVID because of our faith. How have you been as a church then to continue to disciple people through this pandemic, and what have you been doing to kind of feed them and teach them and connect with them?
So just back up a second and say, Chris, what do you think discipleship is in the first place? Because we can all have a very different view.
Chris, what do you think discipleship is in the first place?
I would say discipleship is loving God, surrendering to God your head, your heart, your hands. And I think these three things, this is it. This is the heart of it. And where do you get that from? Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. So we've kind of, in English terms, your head, your heart, your hands. So what we're interested in, anybody who's a Christian or becoming a Christian, I want them to be discipled in what they think, how they reflect, how they learn. Are they learning from others that are not quite like them? Are they expanding their understanding rather than narrowing in? So your head, your heart is about what you're passionate about. It's about your compassion, your heart for justice. Is your heart beating for what breaks God's heart? So that stuff. And it's also around your spiritual disciplines of prayer and fasting and that kind of stuff. And then your hands is that living out your faith practically. So what we've really wanted to do is make sure, are we hitting each of these areas? And one of the things that we use is something called a discipleship assessment tool that just allows us to see how we're doing as a church in our head, our heart, and our hands. And we have questions that we ask people to just see, are you connecting this all up? Because there's a danger that sometimes we're a head church. We love our Sunday sermon. But if I said, what do you do to actually make that action on a Monday morning, they don't really know. And some churches love worship and prayer. Their heart is so passionate about prayer. But if I said, what are you doing about the homeless around the corner from your church? It's nothing, or they don't know why they do what they do. So head, heart, hands. So what we've been doing is saying, right, how can we make sure we're hitting head, heart, and hands? And there's something for everybody just in this season. And I think there's been two responses. There's the digital and there's the analog. Digital works well to some extent, but actually relationship and relational discipleship is really what we see in the Gospels. So what we've been doing is, yes, we've done online church on a Sunday. We've done some live streaming with a sermon in there, but we've also had our Zoom small groups, and we've really pushed everybody, get in a small group for this season. If you're not normally in a small group, do it right now, because this is our primary way of being church. So Wednesday night, so this is where I'm going at 8 o'clock. I've got my discipleship group, and we've got about 9 of them across the church. And we're doing Bible study together, some worship and some prayer every Wednesday night. So we do the head stuff. And one of the tools that we've created as a gift to our church is a little card where it lists all the books of the Bibles and all the chapters, and you can just tick off the chapter of the Bible as you read it. just a silly way of trying to encourage people to count what they've read and what they've not read, that kind of thing. So that's your head. The other thing we've done around head is we've done some book clubs. So we've been reading books and then getting on Zoom to discuss them. So a couple of books that we've been reading. Rob Bell's Love Wins. Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't mind my guys reading books that everybody doesn't agree with. I think that's a good way of learning theology. So Love Wins. We did one on race. We need to talk about race. That was a good one. And we've been doing one on this book, The Common Rule, Habits of Purpose in the Age of Distraction. So for those that really want to get their head thinking, we've had that. Around heart, we've really gone analog, and we have tools that we use as a church, but we've had them all over the place. And we wanted one place that we could give something to everybody at church that would help them really start doing some heart stuff, heart work. So we made these little booklets. You got day, you got night. So the day is we encourage everybody from church to do something called a 3-2-1. A 3-2-1 is feed, speak, and encounter. So 3, read your Bible for 3 minutes. Feed yourself with the Bible. 2 minutes, speak to God. Tell him what's going on in your day. 1 minute, just listen to God, see what he has to say to you. So we've been encouraging everybody, start your day with a 3-2-1. It's the same length of time it takes to make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. So you can do it over breakfast. So we've been encouraging them doing that. And in here, we've also given them just kind of more help than breaking it down, how to do your 3, how to do your 2, and how to do your 1. They've loved this. When we put this in the post, and people got really excited because they'd received some post. They could touch something for the first time.
And it wasn't a bill.
People loved it. We put a little cross in the post for them as well, a little wooden cross. And we said, we're just sending a cross to you. We bought them from Bethlehem, and we said, we're just giving it to you. Put it in your pocket. When you're working at home, have it on your key ring. Just know that Christ is close to you. So we've done these analog things that's trying to engage people's hearts. And then we've done night prayer at the back of it, where we just do a very simple night prayer that we encourage people to pray at bedtime. People have absolutely loved that idea. So we made one for our kids as well. So some of our parents want to pray with their kids on an evening, but don't know how to do it. So we said, well, let's give them a little nice way of doing it. And it's a colouring book. So the kids get to colour in the prayers, and the parents get to pray them with the kids. That's the Lord's Prayer. Very white, isn't it? There you go. Can't see that. But by doing this, they've gone in the post. The kids have received them. They feel like they've got something that's for them. And we have just really found analog has worked beautifully. Something with a stamp in the corner. We could have walked the neighbourhood. It's only small. There's something about receiving something through the post that people have absolutely loved. So we've done that. Then the other thing we've done around hands is all of the stuff. So Fern Street, our community centre, all the work from there, all the work from the cafe. We've just said to people, get involved, give an hour. One of my favourite stories from COVID was we partnered an elderly people up with single individuals from our church, people who were living on their own. And these individuals were calling these elderly folk who also lived on their own, just a befriending service. One evening, we were just about to have church Keep Fit. We were going to have an 80s Keep Fit on Zoom. And one of the women from church calls me up. She says, I've just called the lady that I'm meant to ring, and I'm concerned that she's fallen. I can hear her voice, and I don't know what to do. My wife, we only live on the corner from the lady, so my wife goes round and we call an ambulance, and actually the woman's fallen. In fact, the woman had fallen the night before, and she's been stuck, and I think it was like a knitting box with all the wool. Bum in there, feet sticking up. She'd been there overnight. She hadn't eaten, drank, and the ambulance service came. They kicked the door down, and the woman was taken to hospital. She was actually there for 3 weeks. It really affected her mental health. And we were able to then make a phone call to another guy from church who came and made the door on a flat good, and because they just kicked the door in. The ambulance had gone. And for me, that was a perfect example of hands. Here's somebody befriending. Here's somebody knocking on a door to see what's going on. Here's somebody coming with his drill to repair the door. So we've really worked hard to say, what are you doing in this season to love somebody else, engage with somebody else, be generous to somebody else. And we've seen everybody at church doing something, which I've loved how ready people were to actually get on with doing it. So there's your head, your heart, and your hands.
And that's brilliant. Those booklets are great. And in fact, actually, someone's just asked us a question: are they available? Have you just made them for yourself? Is it something, a resource you could offer to others?
We could definitely offer it. What I could definitely do, if anybody's interested, if they send me an email, I can give you the artwork, and you can get them printed. I'll tell you where we got them printed. Dead easy.
Brilliant.
Really simple. I think we got something like 500 made. And
so perhaps the easiest thing for that is if anybody wants them, perhaps you could just get in touch with me, and then I can pass it on to Cris, and we can connect people up. That would be so. Yes, already somebody's saying yes, please. Yes, please. Can we get that? It is, like you say, when we talked earlier, it's such a great way to not just connect with people in a way that they enjoy. You're right, that receiving that bit of post is special, but it's also helping them to grow through that as well. It's
putting discipleship in their hands.
Yeah.
Because for me, I often say church is like a Formula One race. Church is more like the pit stop. Life is the race, and we come to a pit stop to get the bugs wiped off the screen, tyres refilled with air, petrol in your tank to get back on the track. And what we're trying to do is give people the tools that they need to have their own pit stop that's not reliant on if the church is open or not.
And I think that's really valuable, especially at the moment when that race that we're all in just seems so kind of hectic and so relentless and so full on, to be able to just to be able to have that tool to say, okay, we're just going to stop just for this moment. We're just going to take this time out. And then we can get back on the track again. As well as kind of feeding people within the church, have you been to spend any time equipping them to find ways to share their faith with others? And how have they gone about doing so?
We have tried numbers of things through COVID to give. What we're trying to do is give our congregation a tool, a resource, a something that they can then use to knock on a door. So, like many churches, we had some little cards made that they could put through the doors of all their neighbours. I'm from All Hallows Bow. We have got a service where we can help. Let us know, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The thing we did was, Mother's Day was very, very, very early on in COVID. Churches had just shut. And what we did was we'd got loads of daffodils that we were stuck with, and they were already in bunches. And what we did, we actually put them outside the front door of church and said, if anybody would like to pick up some daffodils to put on the doorstep of somebody from your street that you know is living on their own right now, with a little note saying, thinking of you, they're there to do. And so people did that. Those little wooden crosses that we bought, we got far more than we needed on purpose, so that people could give them away to people who were in need. So all of that we've done. But then we've also done things like, we did a story slam, 6 storytellers. I have a gong. And the idea is you got 6 storytellers, 5 minutes to tell a story. So the gong goes at the beginning of the story. The gong then goes at 5 minutes, and then they've got 30 seconds to wrap up the story. And we invited 6 individuals to tell a story, 4 of which just had to be funny stories, 1 of which had to be a testimony, and 1 of which just had to be a bit of a parable that was retold. And we had a woman tell her testimony on that first story slam that we did that blew me away, and I'd heard it before. She'd been a heroin addict, and she was in this flat using 2 years ago. And she was this voice had told her to jump over the balcony. So she was about to go and jump over the balcony. And this arm grabbed her and said to her, go home. And she said she'd heard many voices in her head, but this voice was clearly the voice of Jesus. And she said she'd gone home and she hasn't used heroin since, which is not the norm for most addicts that we work, because we have a big addiction ministry. And so she tells this story, and it just broke people. And it was a story of God breaking into her life. So we've been creating space where people can tell their testimony and invite people to come along and hear them. Story Slam on Zoom, gift. We have really appreciated that idea. We used to do it in a local pub, but as we started doing more and more recovery work, it wasn't appropriate to use the pub as much as we used to do. Doing it on Zoom worked, which means we've now just run an alpha course. We're in the middle of doing an alpha course on Zoom, and we've got 17 individuals on the alpha course. The other things we've done, we did a pub quiz. Well, all churches are doing pub quizzes during lockdown, aren't they? You know, that's the social. We did it, and we said we want you to invite your mates to come along and just see how normal other Christians are.
And that's actually a really valuable tool at times, isn't it? Is to put that kind of, that we, we're not going to pray with them necessarily straight away before we do this. It's just going to be a normal time of fun. We haven't got two heads, so we don't all wear sandals, that kind of stuff. It's always really...
And the guy that did the quiz for us, he actually works for the Sun in the football department, Sun newspaper.
Oh, okay.
He's so normal, down to earth. He's just a guy's guy, and he's hosting this pub quiz. And people were going, I can't believe he's a part of your church. So that for us, just showing the normalness of people. So we've done all of those kind of things, trying to just break down those barriers. And we've done church online, and we have had lots of local people just pop in to see. And that's been really interesting. I wouldn't say we've had mega numbers. Some churches say we've grown tenfold because we did it online. I don't know what they're doing. But we have had 5, 10 people who have been watching our services online weekly that don't come to our church, who live locally.
So we talked a lot there about how you've helped your church, about how the church has reached out to others. How do you, one of the questions we've just been asked to ask you is, how do you personally develop your own growth and discipleship in the midst of all this busyness?
That's a very good question. I'll be very honest with you. COVID has been miserable. As somebody who hates January, it always affects my mental health, January. If I don't have a project in January, it affects my mental health. It's been really tough. But what I've really found, so all these spiritual disciplines, I find very helpful myself. Doing your 3-2-1 is your starting place, isn't it? Your 3 wants to become 10 minutes, and your 2 wants to become 8 minutes, and your 1 wants to become 5 minutes as you expand it. So all of those spiritual disciplines I do. But I've been really trying to practice hard things like my mobile phone now completely gets turned off on Friday and only gets turned off after lunchtime on Saturday. So I've been trying to do those kind of disciplines. I've been really practicing going and spending lots of time with my kids, and cycling has been really important for us as a family. Me going off cycling with the kids around East London, just trying to make sure that my relationship with my kids is the best possible relationship that I could have with them. And it's been lovely because I really felt God speak back to me. I've really loved going cycling with my son on a Sunday afternoon. And I've really felt like the Lord say back to me, and Chris, I love going cycling with you as well. That's been really, when I realized the Lord saying that to me, it really broke me. I was in tears at my desk. I suddenly realized the Lord was kind of whispering back to me, and I love when I spend time with you as well.
I think that's really interesting, because I know I've been walking around Chester where I live every morning. I've felt that God's kind of saying that we need to create this time and space. That I felt God saying to me, "You're always too busy starting rushing around, that you don't stop and take time to appreciate, what's around you." I don't just mean in scenery, but what's around you in terms of family and friendships and what's important. So just stop and take time. So that's good. So going.
The other thing I didn't mention was I have a mentor. So I make sure there's somebody who I'm speaking to and spend time with. And I've got a particular person that I speak to, but I also have a couple of peer friends that I know that don't live here, one in the US, one in Bath. And during lockdown, we were speaking weekly, really, with each other, just talking through things together with people that I knew I could trust. And that for me has been mega helpful. having people that I knew got my back.
So it's a great question that we've just been asked here, and in the midst of everything else that was going on, was the Black Lives Matter campaign came to the forefront. What difference has that made to your work?
What a horrible time to have to try to engage with that topic when you can't eyeball and sit your congregation eye to eye. We as a church are a multicultural church. I love the fact that one of my service leaders on a Sunday morning is Timothy, who's 15 years old, just gone 16 years old. He's been my service leader for 3 years. He's a black lad. And very early on, I was like, mate, I want you to lead church for me on a Sunday morning. And then his sister does the week after him as well. We've worked really, really, really hard to get people into positions of leadership of ethnicity. And that for us has been mega, mega important. Black Lives Matter then hits. A lot of hurt starts coming out, but you can't sit down with people. It was like this, it was horrible. So we ended up doing a number of post-church Zoom conversations with people who wanted to kind of wrestle through this stuff. We did some small group material on not Black Lives Matter, but on this theological idea that until Black Lives Matter, all lives don't matter. And if you look at the book of Revelation, it's quite clear that every tribe and tongue make up the body of Christ. And if we've not got every tribe and tongue in the leadership of the church, then we are not the body of Christ. So we did a whole lot of small group material on that. We did book clubs on that. And I ended up doing lots of one-on-one conversations with people, making sure that I was listening really carefully. And although I felt that we'd done quite a lot in recent years, I wanted to make sure that we were very fast to repent. Even if there wasn't huge amounts to repent of, it was important that we repented and listened. And one of the things that I realized was I don't get the right as a white man to say when that conversation is over. And I needed my congregation to know they were in the driving seat of how long that conversation lasted and what it looked like. And I think we dealt with it the best we could in what was a very horrible season to deal with it on. But we've decided that every term there'll be something around ethnicity, diversity as a part of our church that keeps ticking that question over, so it doesn't drift off again.
Okay, thanks for your honesty. So kind of going forward with discipleship, the world, it would appear, is going to be strange like this for quite a while. How do you see continue to develop discipleship? What tools have you as a church and then you as an organisation, We Are Making Disciples? Do you perhaps have a book that you might like to plug while you have this opportunity?
So one of the things that we are able to do right now because of Zoom is engage with people in the middle of the day when you couldn't normally engage with them because it's work. So what I'm finding is I'm getting to spend more time with people one-on-one. We have a website, wearemakingdisciples.com, and on there we've got this discipleship assessment tool that we've developed that asks you 20 questions, then lets you see how you are doing around your head, your heart, and your hands. We have been using that all the way through lockdown with people, helping them self-reflect on what they need to be reflecting on. How can you possibly grow as a disciple if you don't know a particular issue is an issue? How are people meant to be aware that creation care is at the heart of the gospel unless they've heard it's at the heart of the gospel? So the assessment tool allows you to ask those questions. And what we found with that is it's been a great, you do it on your phone, you can fill the form in on the phone, it gives you your results. That has been a really good way for us to do discipleship because it was all set up and ready. We launched it 2 years ago online. And we've been able to really do that with people without having to get something to them. So that's one of the things that we have done. And the next steps for us is that we are launching a Lent book. It's
I,
awesome. Go on.
before you go into that, can I just stop because it kind of fits in here then?
Yeah.
If you're moving on to Lent, do you do discipleship in terms of themes in a yearly cycle?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you do discipleship into those terms and themes?
Every year I run some material that we call Making Disciples. It's what we've put out as the workbook, but it's basically what we run as a discipleship thing at church. And we do it on a Sunday and we do it in our midweek groups. And really all it does is walk people through 8 sessions around head, heart and hands.
Mm-hmm.
It means to be a disciple of Jesus as we get discipled in these areas. And we run that every 2 years. What we then do is we use this framework of head, heart, and hands in all teaching series. So, as an example, we have just done the book of Thessalonians during lockdown. And in that teaching, we aim to talk about our head, our heart, and our hands. So that language for us just becomes the language of most sermons. Mm-hmm. Or the outline of a sermon is head, heart, and hands. So we're going to look at the passage, understand what it's saying first. Then we're going to talk about how it impacts our lives and what needs to change in here. And then at the end, we talk about what do we now do because we've read this passage with our hands. What does this look like to live this out? So that rhythm of head, heart, and hands is our discipleship practice. It's just what we do. So our congregation know, what is discipleship? Cris, discipleship is loving God with your head, your heart, and your hands. Or they might say surrendering to God, your head, your heart, and your hands. And therefore, we're looking all the time for that framework to be in whatever teaching series we do on a Sunday. So any teaching series then becomes a discipleship teaching series. They don't necessarily know that, but it's really what it is. It's what does the Bible say? How does it impact our internals? And then how does it impact how we act out our lives? So that's basically how we frame everything. Be it in a Lent series, a normal season, or a particular discipleship themed season.
I will come back to that Lent season, I promise, in just a moment. But how do you, the question we've been asked is, how do you build the confidence then of people to participate in all that's going on?
Brilliant. Yes. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my. So I've been working really hard this season to try and bring as many people in to be part of our online services by getting them to record bits of the online service. So it wasn't just us. I'd lined up one of our church members to come, and now we could have them in the back of the church to film something. We said, look, would you come and record the opening to the service? She chickened out half an hour. You're like, oh, it's really, really, really hard. The way we do it is apprenticeship is our model. So if I want to see somebody grow in something, I'll say, do you want to come and do this with me? So I've got a girl at the moment who's looking at ordination. And I got her to that point of looking at ordination by saying to her, a week on Sunday, I'm leading the evening service. I'm getting bored of my own voice. Do you want to come and do it with me? Do half and half. We'll tag team it. So she did. And I got her to do the easier bits of the service. Mm-hmm. And then the next time I was leading, I said, do you want to do it with me again? But I'll give you a little bit more this time. So that apprenticeship model is how we do it. So from tea and coffee, hospitality, to welcome, how people arrive on a Sunday and how they feel, all of that stuff, apprenticeship. Small group leaders are expected to have somebody in their small group that they're just encouraging to either do the hospitality or to maybe do some of the prayer. So all the time we're saying, who is it you're inviting to do it with you? And that's a challenge to me. It's a challenge to our worship leader, it's a challenge to my wife, to our youth worker, to our community worker. Who are you doing it with? And that really is what helps people build confidence. Most of my church in East London, they are so low in confidence. Middle-class people move into East London, they come with buckets of confidence and they can take over, and it's not helpful. Mm. I want to grow an indigenous local church that brings in people who are moving into East London for a while, but I know they're only here for 4 years, 5 years. It's the locals I really want to grow. I want to leave a church that's local. So I'm always saying, come and do it with me, to the point where they're able to then do it. So we've now got 6 people who lead our morning service. So once every 6 weeks, apart from Timothy, who definitely does it every month, because I think it's really important, because he's young, he's black. I'm kind of like, that's a culture setter.
Yeah.
Says something to people because they see Tim up there. So we now are able to cycle through a number of people to lead our services. So it's that apprenticeship model. So
we'll come back to where we were before when I interrupt you with those great questions. Is you're going forward, continue to develop this discipleship model and continue to help people grow and all that, and so you've come up with a tool to think about that could be used by other churches now to cover over Lent.
Yeah. So anything on Making Disciples website first came out of a church that used it, and it went, wow, this actually works. Friends of mine then said, can I use that? Lots of churches don't have the resources or the time or creativity to come up with tools. That's not my issue. Finding money to get it out there is my bigger issue. So the Making Disciples assessment tool that we first used, we put that on the website for free. The workbook costs about £9, but that's a partnership with Essential Christian who basically printed it for us, and the money goes back to them. I had then designed something at our church for Lent 2 years ago, where 40 days of Lent, let's commit ourselves to discipleship. We take the 20 questions off the discipleship wheel and we doubled them up, so use them twice. There was 40 days, 40 questions. And we've come up with a tool where somebody does their assessment at the beginning of Lent. They then have the 40 days of apprenticeship with Jesus. So it's called Apprenticeship to Jesus, Walking in the Way for 40 days. Or 40 days of walking in the way, it's called, sorry. And the idea is that a church can say to a congregation, we are going to walk in the way of Jesus for 40 days, learning spiritual disciplines, learning about what it means to be a disciple, what are the implications for all areas of our lives. Every day you've got a question from the wheel, you've got a thought, a Bible passage, and something to do or activate. Try this today, bit of homework. And the idea is over Lent, then you can learn some spiritual disciplines in a fun way. That means that end of Lent, people have actually, because this whole thing about recovery, if you're in recovery from addiction, your first 40 days are the most important. If you put in new disciplines in for 40 days, you're more likely to live them out after the 40 days. So that's what we're really trying to use. So that book comes out in the autumn, ready for Lent 2021. We used it as a church 2 years ago. We printed it ourselves. The congregation loved it. We made some changes, some alterations, and we're now partnering with SPCK, who are basically helping us get that book out there under the Making Disciples banner. But what it is our discipleship tool, which really does work well with 40 days of putting some new practices into your life. And the other thing just to say about the assessment tool, what we've done with the website is if you had a congregation of 20, 50, 100, if you got everybody in your church to do that assessment tool online, your church leader can access the data from the congregation. And most of us are data poor on how are our congregations doing in their discipleship. And what you can do is you can see the amalgamated data of your congregation. You can't see individuals, but you can see the overall shape of your church. You can see how your over 65s are doing, or how your under 25s are doing. And that then can change. So we ended up changing what we did with our men's ministry one season, because when we looked, we realized all of our men were getting stuck in the same area. So we were able to do some men's breakfast around the topics that they were getting stuck with.
Right.
And that is a gift to a church, and that's free.
Absolutely.
If your church does the assessment, you get your data for free. There's no cost for you. Church leaders have used that. Have really found that helpful.
So just give us that website again, Chris.
We are makingdisciples.com. It's like Asda, Asda has that little snap line, don't they? Where they pat the bum. I can't remember what it is now.
No, neither can I.
Yeah, so the website name is We Are Making Disciples. So it's the action of making. So wearemakingdisciples.com.
The Making Disciples book, someone just asked, is it available on Kindle? It's not out yet, is it?
all of our resources are on the website.
Okay.
So the Making Disciples workbook is on the website. I have had people say, Chris, I would prefer it as a PDF. And what I've said is, if you buy a copy, I'll give you a PDF of it. You know, for us, it's not about money making, it's about recouping some of the costs. But on the website, all of the assessment and worksheets that are in this book are on the website for free.
Okay.
Well,
Fabulous.
the new book that comes out, Apprentice to Jesus, 40 Days of Walking in the Way, I think it's already mentioned on Eden, and it's already mentioned on Amazon. There's a listing for it there already, but it will appear on our website later in the autumn, so you can buy it through Eden, because Eden, that's the best place to buy anything, isn't
Fabulous.
it?
And I said to you earlier, that ties in really well with the ULC's Walking the Way initiative, and I think that might be a great tool for lots of churches. Question here that we've not asked, and I'm conscious that we've got like 4 minutes left. I promised I'd let you go so you could go on to your next thing, is how do you enable people to share in decision making in all the richness of culture and difference that you must have in your church?
Great. I'm the kind of person that I love working in teams. I love working with people. I love listening to them. I want to work with them. And that's not because I want to appease people. I actually think in a neighborhood like ours, where decisions were taken away for people for years, decisions have been made for this neighborhood that have been disastrous for this neighborhood. I want to empower my neighborhood better. So what we do is I really use my PCC, my elders, to make decisions. So last night we made a decision on would church open or not. And I gave them 3 scenarios and I said, I want you to decide, this is your church. And giving people the chance to make decisions really empowers them. So for me, I love putting people into little teams. My small group leader team, I'll often gather them and say, guys, what do you think about what we should be looking at next year? I want to empower them to make decisions. And the first time I did that, they really struggled. They could only imagine what they'd seen before. So I thought, right, let me give them 4 scenarios that they can kind of pick from. And that would start to give them the ability to make decisions and know that I really trusted them in the decision making. So that's been really important for us all along. And during lockdown, I emailed the entire church with a questionnaire. And I said, guys, this is what we're doing. Is it working for you? What would you like to see? Do you have any ideas of stuff we could try? And I got people to fill in. Now, we only got 1/3 of our church to fill it in, but the people that did fill it in really excited me. Most people were just happy. But giving people the chance to feedback empowered them in a way that was really exciting. To see them really loving being asked, what's your thought about how we're responding as a church? So we just keep saying to the congregation, what's your view? What's your view?
Brilliant. Chris, thank you. We've got a minute of your time left. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your thoughts. If there's anything that people here might want to pray for you, what would you like us to pray for you?
So last week we had this horrendous, 500 yards from the church, a building site crane collapsed on 4 households and a lady passed away. It was horrible. It is horrible. It's very obvious in the neighborhood that this is a crime scene. There's police everywhere right now. We would really appreciate peace. People are scared to leave their houses, not just because of COVID, but because of this. 2 years ago, we had a building site drop a stack of bricks on a woman walking in the street, and she passed away. And I think there's just this fear in the street.
Chris, I'm sure we can all pray for peace for you. Thank you again. There's been lots of inspiring stuff. People have said it's been really inspiring. If people want to watch this again, or if you want to tell friends to come and watch this, it's been recorded. It will be on the Mersey Synod Facebook page. It'll also be on the Mersey Synod YouTube page. So like and subscribe. I think that's the right way around. Like and subscribe, and that'd be great.
I mentioned one thing.
Of course you can. You can mention whatever you like.
One of the other things we do to help churches with making disciples, we put out a podcast every Monday morning. It's on Apple. You'll find it on the website, Making Disciples website. But every Monday we put out a podcast, and we aim each one to be a bit different. So last week was an interview with an Iranian convert who'd been in prison for 4 years. Before that, we had John Mark Comer, who does a lot on spiritual disciplines. We've had the Archbishop of Canterbury, the old Archbishop, as well as just some short teachings as well. So that's every Monday, and it's really getting traction with people wanting to listen to something.
We've been sharing some of those on the Medicinal Facebook page, as you're aware, and we'll continue to do that and to take off where we've left off. So if you get Christmas in August, that's why, because we're slightly out of sync with where Chris is. But hey, look, Christmas in August, it's a great idea. It'll catch on, I'm sure. 12th of August, Andrew Roberts, thinking about how do we develop holy habits whilst socially isolated. That'd be great to come along with that. So thanks very much again, Chris. Enjoy your time tonight in your small group, and please reassure the people you meet with tonight and yourself that we will be praying for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers, Chris. Good to talk to you.
Bless you.
Right. God bless. Bye.